All right, friends, welcome to part 7 of the series. You've acquired Bitcoin, you've secured it, and some of you may stop there, and that is perfectly fine. But others will want to know ways that you can actually use your Bitcoin. And so in this section, we are going to cover just that. Let's jump in. So some of you are going to be very happy to just hodl your Bitcoin, and there is nothing wrong with that whatsoever. As we covered a little bit in the kind of what is money section, a new form of money typically goes through these phases where it is first a collectible, then it becomes a store of value, and that is really still where we are with Bitcoin. Now, you'll hear a lot of people say Bitcoin, as sort of an investment. I view it, and many others view it, much more as a savings technology. It is a way to preserve the purchasing power of your savings. And so some of you will want to just hodl this until the inevitable phase of hyper-Bitcoinization, when it ultimately becomes more than just a store of value. And we are starting to see that transition go from just store of value to also becoming a medium of exchange, i.e. using it for everyday transactions and for purchasing goods and services. We've seen that most explicitly with El Salvador making Bitcoin legal tender right alongside the US dollar. Very interesting stuff. And then ultimately, it's going to serve the third key function of money, which is serving as a unit of account, meaning all the world's assets, everything that we know, right? If you're in the US and many times if you're not in the US, you're used to pricing things in US dollars, which is this sort of dominant money that we've seen for some time now. But ultimately, we will all begin to think and price our lives in Bitcoin. So how many sats, again, one Satoshi, there's 100 million Satoshis in a Bitcoin. How many sats is a cup of coffee? How many sats is a house? How many sats is a, vacation to wherever? And so that's the progression that we're on now. So the first sort of category of like using your Bitcoin is pretty obvious. It's spending it. And so what are some of the different ways you could do this? Number one, you could use a service like Bitrefill, which has essentially gift cards for a wide range of different goods and services. And so I would encourage you to just check them out and look through all the different categories of stuff that you can buy with your Bitcoin. Very, very cool stuff. And there are indeed, individuals I know who pay for a majority of things in their life with Bitcoin, largely through things like Bitrefill. And then secondly, we start to get into the Bitcoin Lightning Network. Now, I'm not going to go into the Lightning Network in detail in this beginner series, but as I will cover in the next section, it is definitely an area that you want to put on your sort of homework list, because the Lightning Network is what enables Bitcoin to be used for small everyday payments and even micropayments. And so going to, Starbucks or wherever to grab a cup of coffee using the Lightning Network is what you would do to spend your Bitcoin accordingly. Now, of course, most merchants in the world and most geographies, you wouldn't be able to do that. They wouldn't accept Bitcoin as payment. You do have that happening, of course, in places like El Salvador, and you have it sparingly in merchants elsewhere. There was all the whole drama over the summer about Tesla, accepting Bitcoin as payment, not accepting Bitcoin as payment, etc. So it's only a matter of time. More and more kind of merchants and companies are going to realize the benefits of Bitcoin and are going to want to accept it as payment. So we're not there yet. That is how Bitcoin's transition to becoming a global medium of exchange will happen. It will happen on the Lightning Network. Now, again, some of you are probably listening to this thinking, well, like, Ian, why would I want to spend the hardest money that's ever been created when I have, worthless fiat in my pocket? And I would agree with you. So I'm just throwing this out as what this can look like if you are trying to go sort of full Bitcoin, right? Like there are now individuals in the Bitcoin community who have not just gotten off zero in terms of zero Bitcoin, but are now getting on zero, except this time the zero is fiat. And so you're seeing new sort of neobanks like Level that are getting spun up and built to enable individuals to live on Bitcoin fully, full stop, period. And so I will flash this up and link them in the description. I haven't explored this too much myself, but you're going to see more and more of this, and that is exciting stuff. The other category for kind of using your Bitcoin is probably going to be something like borrowing and lending. And so, for example, you can borrow against your Bitcoin. Let's say that you have perhaps an unexpected life expense that comes up, and you have this highly valuable, scarce asset that is Bitcoin. And so there are platforms like Unchained Capital, BlockFi, Celsius, Nexo that allow you to raise fiat against your Bitcoin. And by the way, this is the secret of the ultra wealthy. Think of someone who owns sort of highly prized real estate in somewhere like Manhattan. The value of that real estate has just gone up over time. And so what these individuals do is they just borrow against that and roll the debt over. Meaning, let's say in 2022, I borrow X amount of fiat against my little parcel of land in Manhattan. And by 2023, the value of that land has gone up even more. So what do? I borrow another loan against my land. I use part of the proceeds to pay off the prior loan, and then I still have the difference left over to live on. And you repeat and rinse and wash and repeat. And so this is a mega secret of the rich. This is a far better thing to do than selling your Bitcoin, right? You would never want to do that if you can possibly help it. And so instead you can borrow against it. Now, of course, there are risks to doing this. I've covered a lot of this in depth in other videos. And so I would encourage you to check those out. But this would be a situation in which you need to raise fiat and you are willing to accept the risk of borrowing against your scarce asset of Bitcoin. The flip side of that is you can also lend your Bitcoin and earn interest denominated in Bitcoin. So an example of this would be something like Celsius, BlockFi. There's a lot of platforms out there, and these interest rates are going to be more market driven. They're not going to be the artificially suppressed, basically zero rates that you see today. And so this is very appealing for people who say, look, like I'm happy holding Bitcoin, but I'm also happy taking on some additional risk because once you deposit your Bitcoin with one of these platforms, again, not your keys, not your coins. And so if you're so interested in either borrowing or lending, what I would recommend, number one, for the borrowing side, do something like Unchained Capital. I recently did a whole video on that. The benefit of Unchained Capital is they have a multi-sig custody model where you can still hold control of either the majority or at least one of the keys that would be required to access the funds. And then on the borrowing or on the lending side, if you're interested in kind of earning interest on your Bitcoin, I have personally used Celsius in the past. And so I don't really have much other kind of experience. I would only ever put a portion of my stack on there, make it a portion that that you can afford to lose. But I've had very good experience with Celsius. I would avoid something like BlockFi. I think there's just been too many kind of questionable cases, a lot of kind of schemy ethics that are happening over there. And so I would probably avoid them altogether. I've heard good things about Nexo, but I can't comment based on personal experience. So there you go. There are definitely other ways to sort of use Bitcoin, but I think for purposes of this series, those are really the main categories. Again, spending it, you can today go on something like Bitrefill to do that. And then borrowing and lending, again, check out Unchained Capital and Celsius. Those would be my sort of recommendations there if you were to ask me to make them. Now, in the final kind of informational section of this series, let's discuss a couple topics that are definitely more advanced, but worth studying more.